Welcome to Off the Wall. My name is Trey. Thank you so much for joining me today. Whether you're listening on the go, watching from the comfort of your home, appreciate you taking the time to check out the podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and give us a little thumbs up and subscribe. If you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I think it's a thumbs up and rating, review, 5 stars preferably, but hey, do you? And if you're not listening on Spotify and you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hop over to Spotify and do all that stuff. And if you're listening on Spotify, go ahead and help your boy out. Hop over to YouTube, give us a little thumbs up and subscribe as well. Help us grow this thing out as much as we can. And while you're at it, head over to Instagram, Twitter/X, and TikTok. Give us a follow. Off the Wall FB, F as in foot, B as in ball. Off the Wall FB. We're posting all sorts of content on each of those, getting in the mix on Twitter and TikTok a little bit, posting some more, not long form, but medium form content on Instagram as well. So go give us a follow there. But we had an eventful week in good ways and bad ways in the indoor and arena football world. IFL Week 9 was this past weekend, had a great slate of games, a couple games that end of the year might end up being Game of the Year nominees, a couple games that were some tough, ugly watches, but that's the IFL. You never know what you're going to get, but they're all entertaining in their own way. We also have an interview with kicker Alberto Castaneda, who's currently a free agent and looking for his next opportunity, but he had some experience kicking in the CIF with a couple of teams that are currently in the AFL, and he had a semi-viral moment at an AFL game recently that kind of made me discover him and connect with him on Instagram, which we'll dive into that a little bit later on with the full interview with him. Then lastly, we'll dive into AFL Week 3, where we had a couple more teams fold since the last time we released a podcast, and a couple other things went down that is worth noting. And there's not a whole lot of games being played in the AFL nowadays. It's a lot more drama off the field that's going down, and things we're hearing through third parties. Still not hearing a lot from the league, but we'll kind of break down where we're at with certain things and give you an idea of what the landscape currently looks like. But let's dive into some actual football games, the IFL Week 9. Starting off Week 9, we've got the Quad City Steamwheelers at the Sioux Falls Storm, and Quad City ended up winning this game 56-49. So a very, very high scoring game for both of these teams. Total points over 100, which is always a great sign in the IFL. And this was the very first game of the weekend, and this was one heck of a way to start things off. Both teams heading into the game need to get out of their own way, and were their own worst enemies. And the reason why they weren't as successful as they should be so far this season is because of themselves. So it was a good opportunity for each team to get right and bounce back. And in a way, both teams did that, although only one team walked away with a win, and that was Quad City. Starting with Quad City, the issue with them has been they need to get out of their own way, right? They from top to bottom, their roster is one of the best in the league. They just have to stop making silly mistakes, whether it be drop passes, turnovers, bad penalties, like all things that they have direct control over. If they're able to control those things, they can compete with any team in the East. And if they're able to start stringing together some victories, they can get into the playoffs. And with the way this roster is built, if they can get some consistent quarterback play, they can knock some teams off from that are higher in the standings that in the playoffs. Like they have the team that can do that. The only hiccups for Quad City in this game were a missed field goal early in the game, and then a botched snap that kind of opened the door for Sioux Falls to get back into the game and potentially sneak away with one. But Quad City was able to hold on and hold on for the win. So they played nearly 60 minutes, not a full 60 minutes, nearly 60 minutes of mistake-free football, and that's what they needed. And that was a giant step in the right direction. They even had an unbelievable play that resulted in a touchdown catch that made the SportsCenter top 10. I believe it was number 1. So head over to Off the Wall FB to go check that out. It's a very, very good catch over the wall. You will not be disappointed. But the Steamwheelers are a playoff contender if they could just avoid the self-inflicted wounds. Quarterback Mike Irwin, he looked great. He had 178 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. And running back Eddie Vander was the best player on the field in this game. He had some big-time touchdown catches and another score on the ground, and then mix in some special teams magic to start the second half from our guy Jared Harrington. And this game was a great step in the right direction for Quad City. But on the other side, Sioux Falls also took a step in the right direction. They looked a lot better in this game. Even though they lost, this was a step in the right direction. But it might be too little too late at this point. They're 1-6 on the year. the teams that are going to make the playoffs in the East are becoming a little bit more and more apparent. The teams that aren't, including Sioux Falls, are becoming a little bit more and more apparent too. So um, this is their worst season ever, and they're in the middle of it, which is a shame considering the quality of players that they have on both sides of the ball. They just haven't been able to get as much out of their offense as they need. Quarterback Lorenzo Brown Jr. did have 5 total touchdowns, but he also had a couple of costly turnovers as well. Defensive lineman Claude Davis was making plays up and down the field on defense, and he also had to step in on offense. He stepped in on the offensive line when a player got hurt, so he was doing double duty there for a little bit. So he's a veteran of the game. He's been, I think, with the Storm for the better part of 7-8 years at this point, maybe more. He was extremely versatile, and they needed him to step in, and they nearly pulled off the win thanks to his efforts. And I believe he might have been the one to recover the fumble that put them ahead with about a minute left. So it was a step in the right direction, but they needed this game in week 3 or week 4, week 5 at the latest. Getting this game 7 games into your season, it might be too little too late. And unless they go on a run and win 6, 7, 8 games in a row right now, it's not looking good for the Storm. So they're by no means out of it statistically. Like I said, they're still technically in it, but unless they start, making some magic, it's not looking good. It might be time to start letting some of the younger players get some reps and seeing what you could build towards in the future, and get some play time on film for some of the younger guys to hopefully make the step to the next level. Because yeah, if you're Sioux Falls, this season has not gone the way you hoped, and I don't want to say start looking to next year, but start thinking about it. Next game we got was also on Friday night. It's the San Diego Strikeforce at the Vegas Nighthawks, and this game was a shootout. Vegas ended up winning this game 68-64. Do the quick math there. That's 132 points. The over-under on this was 98, so they went 34 points over that combined. And starting with Vegas, their offense somehow found a way to get even better. And that's saying something, because they were already one of the best in the league, but now statistically, they are the best in the league, not one of the best. Right now, they are the league leaders in points per game at 54.7. So they're averaging 54.7 points per game. We'll talk about some other teams later that are having trouble hitting 50 points in a single game. They're averaging 54. So they're just unbelievable on offense. And in this game, they produced 10 touchdowns on offense, including 7 on the ground from Antonio Wimbush, Jerome Johnson, Caleb Hawley, and CJ Wyndham. And then wide receiver Quentin Randolph had himself a day through the air. He had 7 catches for 123 yards and a touchdown. And this whole game was very impressive. But if you had to point to an area of opportunity, it would have to be the special teams for Vegas. The old saying, or the new saying, I should say, special teams, special players, special plays. They were the wrong type of special for Vegas in this game. They gave up 2 kick returns for touchdowns that like slammed the door wide open for San Diego to get back into the game and shift some momentum multiple times when Vegas had the opportunity to really do some damage and put them away. Yards per return, they were averaging 24 yards per kick return, which on a 50-yard field, that's half the field. So San Diego was practically starting at the 20, 25-yard line every single drive. And so San Diego is efficient enough on offense. You don't need to give them any help. But special teams for Vegas, they were keeping San Diego in the game, giving them a little bit of a lifeline when things started off bad for San Diego at the beginning. If they can get that cleaned up, in particular, Vegas is the best team in the IFL right now. They're the only undefeated team. But if you had to point to a weakness, I would not be surprised to see them drop a game or two because of special teams down the line. On the other side, San Diego's aggressive nature on offense is what makes them so dangerous. They're willing to air it out. They're willing to go for it in situations when other teams, when I say other teams, like 80, 90% of the rest of the league would not be willing to do what they're willing to do. And that's why they're so dangerous, and that's why they're so good if it works. This game, they ended up losing by 4 points, right? So let's do the math here. Those 4 points can be found in some spots where they were a little aggressive. They missed 3 dropkick PATs. So an extra point is a standard snap it to the holder, kicker kicks it, 1 point. A drop kick is the snap goes directly to the kicker drops the ball and kicks it as it's hitting the ground. That's worth 2 points. So they went for that, multiple times. They missed on 3 of them, and they had 2 failed 2-point conversions. So of those 5-point after attempts, you kick an extra point on each of those. Say you go 4 for 5. That's 4 points. It's a tie game. That's the difference in the game right there, was their aggressive nature. So you live by the 2, die by the 2, live by the drop kick, die by the drop kick. When it works, it's great, but the past couple of weeks, it just hasn't been working out for them. And I think special teams as a whole has been an issue in terms of kicking for San Diego all year. So we'll see how they adjust moving forward to be able to get as many points in those spots as they can. But there were also a couple of questionable penalty calls on San Diego in the final minute of the game. Let's just say the camera angles or the lack of camera angles made it a little frustrating to watch, and the stuff that they did show didn't look like there was much contact or much penalty at all. The pass interference specifically, with I think about 45, 50 seconds, somewhere around there. I could be way off on the timestamps, but it was within the final minute. By the time the ref threw the flag, the DB was a full 5 yards away from the receiver. And it was just like, what? There was no other camera angle that showed any definitive PI. So kind of got you thinking maybe somebody at the top made a quick phone call down to Vegas, said, hey, we need to keep this team undefeated. I'm not saying that did happen. I'm not saying that didn't happen, but that's kind of how it felt based on how ticky-tacky those calls were at the end. But San Diego was in this game. They were fully in this game the entire way, and they very easily could have been the ones to knock off Vegas this week. If a couple things went their way, maybe if they weren't so aggressive on those point after attempts. But when you're looking at teams with multiple losses, I will say San Diego is the best 3-loss team in the entire league, may even be the best team with multiple losses out of everybody, just because they are so dangerous. Nate Davis at quarterback. He's a veteran of arena and indoor football, and he knows where to put the ball. He has such great control of the ball, and they have so many dynamic athletes all around him that make his life easier. And the fact that they lost by 4 and they didn't have 2 of their top wide receiver options due to suspension, that kind of makes you think, all right, they get a full squad back. What's that mean? If they were able to put 64 on the board with their 2 top receiving options out, you get them back in, the sky's the limit with them. So San Diego's only losses are to the current best team in the league. They're undefeated, only undefeated team in the league, and the reigning champs. That's it. Those are the only 2 teams that San Diego has lost to. So San Diego's in a really good spot. If they were in the East, they'd probably be undefeated right now. But San Diego's still a very good team, but can't say enough about Vegas and how well they performed in this game. Again, 10 total touchdowns is insane in a single game. So both these teams are really good. Luckily, we get them again later on in the regular season, and maybe we'll get them in the playoffs. That would be awesome. Next up, we've got the Jacksonville Sharks at the Frisco Fighters, and Frisco put a hurtin' on Jacksonville, winning 68-33. Jacksonville, man, last week, you looked pretty good against Tulsa. I thought you would be able to keep it competitive. I didn't think Jacksonville would win this game. The line was Frisco by 17. I thought they'd keep it semi-close. I didn't think that they'd get blown out by 35, the fashion that they did. But just from the opening quarter, you could tell something was off with the Jacksonville offense. And immediately they threw an interception within the first 5 minutes, and Frisco just started doing the Frisco thing early on, and they just started leaning on Jacksonville, and Jacksonville, they couldn't do anything about it. There were poorly thrown passes leading to INTs, stuffed on multiple QB sneaks, fumbling kickoffs. They just couldn't help themselves out even a little bit. So against Frisco, you have to play as perfect of a game as you possibly can. And even then, that might not be enough. There wasn't much balance in the run game. The bulk of the running attempts came from the quarterback, Fred Payton. So you need balance, especially with Jacksonville. You got to spread the ball out to your skill position players. You have great wide receivers. You have a really good running back. Be able to put the ball in their hands and not have it rest in Fred Payton's hands the entire game. You definitely want him to be able to make plays and have the opportunity to do so, but it shouldn't solely rest with him. It was It's frustrating because I thought Jacksonville was starting to turn a corner when in reality they just met a buzzsaw in Frisco that was not stopping. Like there was no stopping Frisco in this game. On the other side, Frisco, they just keep going. Their reigning MVP quarterback is out with an injury, so their backup quarterback, any other situation in the league, backup quarterback steps in, you're like, uh-oh, not Frisco. Nope. They stepped right in. They had 8 rushing touchdowns on the ground, 1 through the air as a collective offense. Defense snagged 2 interceptions, stuffed the Sharks multiple times for multiple turnovers on downs. Special teams caused turnovers, even scored a touchdown themselves on a fumbled kickoff. And this was one of the first games this year where you got a full display of the running back duo that they have in Meatball Carter and Jimmy Smith, where they just lean on you. And the fact that they had a lead, they were just running the hell out of the ball. Meatball had 4 touchdowns. Jimmy Smith had 1. Quarterback Trip Harrington had a couple as well, and they were just leaning on Jacksonville, and Frisco's defense was taking advantage of Jacksonville's mistakes, and Frisco's offense just ran the ball right down their throat, and there was nothing they could do. So Frisco set themselves apart as the best team in the East. It's without question at this point, based on how some of the other teams have looked so far this season. Frisco is the very best team in the East, which makes next week's game against Green Bay very, very interesting because it'll be a nice little strength on strength, but we'll get to that a little bit later. But Frisco looks very, very good. And this is without their MVP quarterback. So that's a scary thought. Next up, we've got the Tulsa Oilers at the Green Bay Blizzard, and Green Bay won this game 42-22. So we went from a couple of very high scoring games in the hundreds to teams barely breaking 60. Starting with Green Bay, I'm kind of running out of ways to describe Green Bay's defense and to give them accolades and, tip the cap to them. They're just so good. Tulsa's offense is very explosive and they have a very high ceiling. You remember a few weeks back, they scored 72 in a game. So if they get hot, they can get red hot and they can score points in bunches. And Green Bay just was not having it. They just weren't. They gave up a score on the opening drive of the game, but ever since then, they gave up 15 points the entire rest of the way. So 22 points is an extremely low number in any indoor or arena league. And especially for a team that has the ceiling of Tulsa, it was just so impressive to see Green Bay's defense just dominate. And it started at the defensive line and worked their way back. Every level of that Green Bay defense was hitting hard and letting their presence known. And they're just unbelievably good. And they got back to their identity of running the ball as well. In games where Green Bay struggles a little bit, they get a little pass heavy. Not this game. They had 32 rushing attempts and 20 passing attempts, and they just bled the clock out for the duration of the game. They jumped out to a huge 25-point lead in the second half, and they were just running the ball, keeping the clock moving. And it was one of the uglier games of the weekend. But as we touched on in podcasts before and on the blog on offthewallfb.com, that's how Green Bay plays. They play ugly football, but for them, the uglier the better. And that's how they win games. That's how they're built. That's the way their offense is designed. They have a nasty defense. They have a defensive-minded head coach. So that's how they play. And the rest of the league is very high-flying, quick pace, go, go, go with the offense. They kind of have that opposite approach, and sometimes that works to go far in the playoffs and to win championships. So Green Bay's in a very good spot to at least make the playoffs this year. We'll see if they can keep up these defensive efforts and even further improve things on offense. But Green Bay is not a fun team to play against. And next week against Frisco, Frisco's offense is very dynamic. Green Bay's defense is very, very good. So that's going to be probably the game of the week to watch. But again, we'll get to that a little bit later. On the other side, Tulsa looked lost on offense. I get that Green Bay's defense is very, very good. They're the number 1 defense in the league, but Tulsa could not do much, and they just looked out of sync the entire game. Rushing wise, they were averaging 1.7 yards per carry on the day. They fell behind early, which probably resulted in an adjusted philosophy, but they just didn't look like themselves. And it's tough because Tulsa has done a pretty good job of beating up on lesser isn't the word, but beating up on teams that aren't like the best teams in the conference or in the league, but they just get rolled by the better teams. Like they got rolled by Frisco twice. They got rolled by Green Bay here. So if you want to establish yourself as one of the best teams, not just in the league, but in the conference, you have to show up against these tougher teams. You have to show up against Green Bay. You have to show up against Frisco. Because right now you're beating up on the weak, for lack of a better term, but you're just collapsing under the weight of the top of the conference, the top of the standings. So it's like they're stuck in that in between where they're like the best of the good, best of the bad, but the worst of the good, and that's not a great spot to be in if you have playoff aspirations and beyond. So consistency week to week is going to be important for Tulsa moving forward, and kind of like what we talked about last week. They have hills and valleys, hills and valleys. Right now, they're in the valley of a valley. So we'll see if they can get back up on a hill next week. And one side note here, in this game, I noticed something that drove me insane for Tulsa in particular, but I've seen it across the league. It's the lack of urgency with teams when they're down, especially when they're down 20, 25 points. Tulsa scored a touchdown in the second half. I believe it was like 6-minute mark around there of the third quarter. They scored a touchdown. They're down 25 points. They let an entire minute of time go off the clock while they were figuring out what they were going to do with the 2-point conversion they were going for, reset the play clock, some commotion back and forth, doing this, doing that. They were down by 25, scored a touchdown. There's only 20 minutes of game time left in the game. Where's the urgency? Like I've seen that not just with Tulsa, but I've seen that across the league where people are down multiple scores with 3-4 minutes left, and we're just walking up to the line very casually instead of like, hey, we gotta go. Like we gotta get things moving. So I don't know if it's I don't know what the deal is. Like, do coaches just not think that the rest of the time is as important as the last 5 minutes of the game? Because if you save 30, 40 seconds at the beginning of the third quarter, you're basically tacking that on in the fourth quarter in a way. So you would think you would want to save some time and be, up the urgency a little bit in those situations where you're down a ton of points and have a lot of coming back to do. But yeah, it's just something I've noticed across the league that's very frustrating, not just with Tulsa, but with teams all across the IFL. And I would love to see some teams kind of go and hurry up every now and then and kind of get things going, because I can probably count on one hand how many times I've seen teams like actually hurry up, like, hey, go, spike the ball, do this, do that. Like, it's not happening very often. And you would think if you're down double digits, 2 possessions, anything in that range, time is of the essence. You want to save that, but not always the case. Next up, we've got the Massachusetts Pirates at the Iowa Barnstormers, and Iowa won this game 42-34, so a bit of a shocker. Massachusetts were 10-point favorites against the Barnstormers. Iowa, they looked very, very bad in the first 20 minutes of the game. They scored 3 points through the first, I think, 20, 25 minutes. They couldn't get much going on offense. They couldn't get much going on defense. I was watching the game live along with a couple others, and I sent out a tweet that when they were down 21-3 that we'll put on the screen, I think right here, that basically said, look, Iowa's broken. They need a hard reset. We got to do something, because what they're doing now, it's just not it. So naturally, I hit post, send on that. Iowa goes on a 39-7 run to run up the score and go ahead by 2 scores with about 6-7 minutes left in the game. So you're welcome, Iowa. I'm glad I was able to inspire the boys, inspire the troops in the locker room. But seriously, they flipped the momentum like in an instant, and they were able to hold on for their second win of the season. Wide receiver Trey Long had a quality day. He had 7 catches for 63 yards and 2 touchdowns, and kicker Gabriel Rui hit a 40-yard field goal, which is nuts in the IFL, 2 deuces on kickoffs, and went a perfect 5 for 5 on extra points as well. He arguably should have had a 3rd deuce, but got called back due to offsides. Didn't look very offsides to me, but it is what it is. They got the win. So Iowa looked rough through the first 20 minutes of the game, but they looked great towards the end. And that's kind of a good parallel for how their season has started so far. Very rough in the beginning, starting to figure things out. That's kind of the same script that some of the games have followed as well. So if they can get a strong start in games moving forward, they can start to string together some wins, and they could come knocking on a potential playoff spot and salvage the season. But hats off to Iowa for the adjustments that they made, and they really laid it on the Pirates. On the other side, Massachusetts is in a bit of a rut on offense, and I'm not sure what the solve is. Early in the season, the issue with the Pirates was that they weren't starting strong, but they were finishing strong, so kind of making up for it. This game was the complete opposite. They started off great and then just fell off a cliff. Like their offense could not do much in the second half, and it's a little concerning considering the caliber of players that they have on offense at quarterback, at running back, at wide receiver. They should be able to move the ball up and down the field with ease, but they're just not able to do that. The offense seems to be missing that oomph factor that they had last year and in years past. And I looked at their schedule so far. They only have one game where they scored more than 50 points. They had another that they scored 49, so almost. But the fact that they haven't been able to eclipse the 50-point mark more than once, and we're 7 games into the season, entering week 10, it's a little concerning. Like I said, the talent that they have on offense is great. Jimmy Robinson is a very talented running back. He's second in the league in attempts, second in the league in rushing yards. They have a trio, or not even a trio now, a quadro? Sure, we'll go with that. Of wide receivers that are great receiving threats. So they have the talent to make it happen. They just lack the oomph to really put the fear of God, for lack of a better term, into teams that they had in years past. Because on offense, they scored 1 touchdown in the second half. That was it. So it was just very weird to see the Massachusetts team just fall apart in the second half, where over the first couple weeks of the season, that's when they started to hit their stride and really, really come to life. So Pirates aren't broken, but they definitely need an adjustment. So we'll see what types of adjustments they can make moving forward. Next game we've got is the San Antonio Gunslingers at the Duke City Gladiators, and this game was a very, very fun game to watch. San Antonio won this game 56-53. Starting on the Duke City side of things, we're entering a new era of Duke City Gladiators football, and that's because they have a new quarterback in Joe Mancuso, who is going to be the savior of this organization, at least for this season. We'll see what happens in seasons moving forward, but Duke City's Achilles heel so far this season has been quarterback play and getting consistent quarterback play, and consistent as in not making a lot of mistakes, and consistent in creating big plays. And Joe did that in bunches in this game against San Antonio. He had 4 passing touchdowns and 2 rushing touchdowns. So he was just dynamic in making all the right plays at the right time to keep Duke City in the game. If you have told me 2 weeks ago that Duke City would be putting up 53 points in a game, I would have called you crazy, just because they looked very, very bad, just with a carousel of quarterbacks coming through the organization. But Joe looked great. And the fact that he didn't have all of his weapons on offense either. Duke City is 0-6 right now. Okay. Record-wise, they look awful. But this team is not an 0-6 team when you look at how they've played and the caliber of players that they have. Their defense has been very good this year. They just didn't have a coexisting offense to help them out and keep them in games. The defense kept them around in so many games that they had no business being involved with. They just didn't. But now that they have a quarterback that's capable of putting up 50 plus, that gets interesting. That gets very interesting on offense, and I would not be surprised to see Duke City string together some wins here, play spoiler for some teams that are looking to make some playoff hunt adjustments and maybe jump into a 4 seed or a 3 seed. Not sure if Duke City has the gas to make a full run to the playoffs at this point. Again, they are 0-6, but they're going to be a very, very dangerous team. And if I see Duke City on the schedule and I'm one of these other IFL teams, it's not really all right, we got Duke City anymore. It's like, ah, damn, we got Duke City. So that I'm very excited to see how Duke City performs over these next couple of weeks. On the other side, Sam Castronova. That's it for San Antonio. That's it. He just continues to amaze every single week, and he's continuing his MVP campaign. Turned in another MVP-worthy performance. He went 24 for 29 for 243 yards, 6 passing touchdowns, and added another score on the ground. So a casual 7-touchdown game for Castaneda. He spread the ball out amongst his team pretty well, but he really wasn't feeling the connection he had with wide receiver Kali Rashad, who finished the day with 10 catches for 122 yards and 3 touchdowns. So crazy high numbers for indoor in terms of receiving for Rashad. And they weathered the storm from Duke City pretty well, and they scored to take the lead back with under 10 seconds left. So it was a good test for San Antonio to be put in that spot. And they're right now they're sitting at 3-4, and they're another team like Duke City where you don't really want to play them just because their offense is so unbelievable. So it's kind of the opposite of what Duke City was the past couple of weeks, where the defense was really good. The offense was like, whatever. It's the opposite for San Antonio. Their offense is unbelievable, but their defense is their Achilles heel. So yeah, if I'm an opposing team on the schedule in the near future, not looking forward to playing Sam Casanova, but with the way San Antonio's defense has played, you have a chance to get in a shootout and to stay in it. But Sam Casanova has played unbelievable and would not be surprised to see him take home the MVP trophy at the end of the year. Right now, it's coming down to him and Jerome Johnson from Vegas. You got to give it to Jerome just because his team's 7-0. Sam's team is 3-4. But we still have a lot of season left, and we'll see how things shake out. Next up, we've got the Bay Area Panthers at the Northern Arizona Wranglers, and Bay Area won this game 39-36. So a close, low-scoring game. Knew it was going to be a close, ugly game, but didn't realize it was going to be this ugly. And when I say ugly, it's not in the terms of like, oh, these guys don't know what the heck they're doing. It was ugly in like Green Bay terms, where they love running the football. Bay Area loves running the football and playing great defense, and that's exactly what happened in this game. It's beautiful for them because it fits their strengths as a team, and that's how they won. That's how they've won games this year. They play close, ugly football and pull it off, and that's ultimately all that matters. A win is a win. They all count the same. That's how Bay Area was able to go on a run and win a championship last year, by winning close games like this. So Shane Simpson, running back from the Bay Area Panthers, he had a big day. He had 14 total touches for 120 total yards and 4 touchdowns, and he just found a way to make big play after big play after big play for the Panthers. And I would have liked to have seen the receivers a little bit more involved in the passing game, but ultimately it worked. So you could get better in terms of getting some of the wide receivers like JT Stokes and Patterson in the game, a little bit more involved in the game, I should say. But I think it's something where a quarterback wasn't still fully 100% healthy yet. So we'll see if he's able to get fully healthy and air it out a little bit more, because if they're able to air it out and get a deep passing game going with what Shane Simpson has been able to do on the ground, this offense is going to look very, very dangerous. And the fact that Bay Area was able to go from Justin Rankin last year to Shane Simpson this year, it's not fair. not fair to the rest of the league at all. Bay Area also brought back an old face at kicker with their season-long kicking issues that they've had all year, but they didn't go away. They missed 3 extra points on the day, and even though it didn't cost them this past weekend, it might cost them moving forward. So that's something they got to get figured out, and something they got to account for, because just because it didn't cost them today doesn't mean it won't cost them a win in the future. So hopefully they'll be able to get it figured out and have it not be an issue anymore. On the other side, Northern Arizona seemed to have a different approach to this game than they have had in games in the past, and that was to focus on longer ball control drives. And I guess in an effort to try to control the game, but I think it ended up hurting them more than helping them. Their first drive of the game lasted 9.5 minutes, which is an eternity in the indoor game. Especially when you think about it, it's only a 50-yard field. It took them 9.5 minutes to go 50 yards, 9.5 minutes of game time. So I think Northern Arizona has a very, very dynamic cast of skill players at their disposal, and I don't think they fully utilize them to their potential in this game in particular. Now, Bay Area does have a really good defense and a very strong coaching staff on the defensive side of the ball, but it just wasn't working out. And like I said, I think it hurt them more than it helped them. One of the strengths of this Wranglers team is that their speed and big play ability at wide receiver stretches things out and opens things up. But by slowing things down the way that they did, they kind of neutralized their own strength in a way, if that makes sense. So quarterback Josh Jones got back up to having around 50% of the rushing attempts, which we've talked about in blogs on offthewallfb.com, that whenever that happens, Northern Arizona is not playing to their full potential on offense and not scoring as many points. So getting players like Arziah McCorker more involved. He's one of the most dynamic receivers in the IFL. He only had 2 catches and 2 rushes, so 4 total touches on the day. You got to get the ball in his hands more. You just have to. But despite all this, they hung around and they were right there with the defending champs right up until the very end. So they had a blocked field goal in the first half that, in hindsight, was the difference in the game. It's a 3-point margin, 3 points at the end of the first half. That would have come in handy, right? But yeah, it was a good showing for Northern Arizona, just a little disappointing in terms of what their potential on offense is and what they've shown it can be at times. So we'll see if Northern Arizona can get back to creating some big plays and opening things up on offense, because I just don't think the ball control look from them was suitable for their strengths. Last game of the weekend was another low-scoring game with the Arizona Rattlers going to the Tucson Sugar Skulls. Arizona won this game 38-32. I'm going to be honest with you, when I saw that Dalton Sneed was not the quarterback in for Arizona, I knew what type of game we were about to get. In the picks blog last week, I picked for this game to go over. That was with the idea that Dalton Sneed would be the quarterback, just because of the way he plays efficient, mistake-free football and gets the ball to where it needs to be, whether it's in his hands or not. Backup quarterback Garrett Kettle is not that. He's a great athlete, and I think he's better suited for wide receiver, but apparently in the week of practice leading up to the game, Dalton Sneed had an oblique strain that prevented him from participating. He's still dressed. He still could have played potentially in case of emergency, but I think they're playing the long game and might have had the belief that, hey, we can pull this off with Kettle at quarterback, so let's save Sneed. In the end, it worked out, so kudos for them for being willing to do that. They got the win. But it was upsetting to see Sneed not out there, just because the game could have been a very, very different game for Arizona's offense with him out there. And this just shows that with Dalton Sneed, they scored 55 points in his return game from injury. They reduced that down to 38 points with the backup. So Arizona's offense is a very, very different offense with Dalton Sneed in. So hopefully we'll see him back out there sooner than later, and he won't miss any more extended time. On the other side, for Tucson, this was Malik Mitchell's first game back from injury after missing a handful of games. Tucson's offense didn't look good. Looked a little rusty at times. They have a very good group of running backs and wide receivers that they can get involved in the game, but they have lots of good ingredients, but they don't mix well together, if that makes sense. And that's very frustrating to watch, because they've got players like Mike Jones, they've got Devontae Sapp Lynch, they got Jalen Marshall, who played pretty well in this game, all things considered. So they have all the pieces to be successful. It's just something's missing, and it's not quite there. So the fact that they're sitting here at week 10, and what are they? They're 1-5 right now, heading into week 10. It's not great, especially in the Western Conference, where we've got teams at the top that are just absolute killers. We've got Vegas at the top. We got Bay Area. We've got San Diego. Those are 3 of the top teams in the entire league, let alone the conference. So that leaves, assuming those 3 get playoff spots, which they probably are based on what we've seen, that leaves 1 playoff spot for a team like Tucson, and they're currently 1-5. It's not looking good. So similar to what we talked about with Sioux Falls, you got to start stringing together some wins now if you want a chance to be competitive in the playoffs. Otherwise, it might be time to start playing some younger guys and getting some PT on tape, because it's not going well in Tucson right now. And they showed a lot of promise at the beginning of the year, but the Malik Mitchell injury really derailed things. And hopefully going forward, he'll be able to stay on the field and they'll improve week after week. But it's a tough look in Tucson right now, and we'll have to see if they can gel a little bit more with a fully healthy offense and see what they can do. But this is not a good showing, and this was their time to strike Arizona without Dalton Sneed, and they couldn't do it. So if they play some of the other teams in the West, they're only going to get healthier, and they're going to play some teams that are, quite frankly, more dangerous than Arizona. So if this is how they played against Arizona, I'm not confident in how they're going to play against some of these other teams. So that was IFL Week 9. It was a very, very strong group of games. Some were a little bit more hard nosed and tough football than the others, but some very high scoring games, some very low scoring games. So no matter what you like, there was a game for you. So if you were going to go back and check out a game that you haven't watched, I would highly recommend San Antonio versus Duke City or that San Diego versus Vegas game. I think those two games in particular are going to be Game of the Year nominees when it's all said and done at the end of the season. And we had the privilege of seeing both in the same week. So check those out. Looking ahead to week 10 of the IFL season, which is crazy to say out loud that we're in week 10 already, but we got full slate of games, 8 games this upcoming weekend, 1 on Friday, 6 on Saturday, and 1 on Sunday. So we're going to kick things off on Friday with Iowa at Quad City. It's going to be a pretty good game because both of these teams are on the come up. Iowa has just recently got both of their wins. Quad City's looking like they're finally getting things together. We'll have to see if Mike Irwin continues his quarterback play and if he continues to be the guy for Quad City, because whether it's him or Judd Erickson, they need somebody to be the guy moving forward. So this game, I would expect Quad City to probably be favored by 4.5, 5.5. Over under, I would imagine, is in the mid to high 80s. So maybe like an 86.5, 87.5, somewhere in that range. So that should be a pretty good game. Good little appetizer for the weekend on Friday night. First game of the day on Saturday is going to be the Northern Arizona Wranglers at the Massachusetts Pirates. So we're going to get to see that seafoam green and purple field in Massachusetts. This is going to be a pretty good game and should be fairly high scoring, depending on which version of each team shows up. If the ball control offense of Northern Arizona from last week shows up, going to be low scoring. But if the quick pace, deep threat, McCorker, Maldonado offense shows up, this could be a pretty high scoring game. It could force Massachusetts' hand in terms of letting the ball fly and slinging it. So Massachusetts does play better at home than they do on the road. So I'd imagine Massachusetts is probably going to be favored, probably by less than what was last week, probably closer to 4.5, 5.5, just like the previous game, with this over under probably being in the low 90s. So give it a 92, 91.5, somewhere around that range. So this should be a good one. And it's going to be very visually, aesthetically pleasing as well. This one kicks off at 12:05 p.m. Central. So 1:05 p.m. Eastern, right around the normal kickoff time for NFL during the regular season. So this should be a pretty good one. The best game of the weekend, however, is going to be Frisco at Green Bay. This game kicks off on Saturday at 3:05 p.m. Central. That's 4:05 Eastern. Frisco has a very high-powered offense that's been clicking on all cylinders these past couple of weeks with Trip Harrington at quarterback, and their running game has just been vicious. But on the other side, Green Bay's defense is the very best in the league. So you have the utmost strength on the utmost strength with Frisco's offense versus Green Bay's defense. It's going to come down to, can Green Bay's offense get things going? And, we talked about before, their identity is running the ball. Will they be able to do that effectively against Frisco? We don't know. So I would imagine Frisco is going to be favored heading into this one just because they've been so dominant and they are the leaders in the conference right now. So I would imagine Frisco is probably going to be, I want to say 5.5, 6.5 point favorites, but they're probably going to be close to 8 just because Frisco's lines have been high all season, and for good reason. They're a very good team. So I would imagine the line's probably going to be around 8, 8.5. And if I had to put an over under, this is so tough because Frisco's so high octane and Green Bay is not on offense. So I would probably say this one's going to be in the high 80s, probably like an 88.5. Nice meeting point in the middle. Green Bay's had an over under as low as 77. Frisco's had an over under as high as 104. So kind of meeting in the middle is where I would expect this one to land. We've got 2 games kicking off at 6:05 p.m. Central on Saturday. The first of which is the Sioux Falls Storm at the Jacksonville Sharks. The good news is somebody has to win this game. Both teams are 1-6 heading into this week, and both need a lot of work. So this is, I guess, good that they have each other in this time of need. I would imagine, God, it's so hard to pick who would be a favorite because both of them are not very good. Assuming Lorenzo Brown Jr. gets the start for Sioux Falls, I'd imagine they'd be the favorites by 3.5 or so, just because of that veteran experience versus a young quarterback in Jacksonville. That being said, Jacksonville is the home team and does have a very good home atmosphere. So I would anticipate Sioux Falls still being the favorite, with the over-under probably being in the low 80s, probably like an 83.5, 84.5, because just Jacksonville has trouble scoring on offense, and Sioux Falls runs the ball a ton, which means a lot of running clock, which means less time for scoring plays. So this is probably going to be one of the more lower scoring games of the entire weekend. Then the second 6:05 p.m. Central game is going to be the Tulsa Oilers at the San Antonio Gunslingers. San Antonio can put up points on points on points. Tulsa can either put up points on points or not. they're either, it seems like they either post 60-70 or 20-30, somewhere in that range. So this is going to be interesting to see if Tulsa can get right against San Antonio's defense, which has shown teams in the past can get right versus them. They're the team that they can usually, right their wrongs and get things going. So over under on this one, I would imagine probably be in the high 90s, probably like a 96.5, 97.5. Even that might be a little low given the firepower that San Antonio has. And I would say San Antonio is going to be favored here just because Tulsa has a bit of a slide over the past couple of weeks, given how they perform. So I'd imagine San Antonio is probably going to be 6.5, 7.5 point favorites just because their offense has been unbelievable. But this is again a prime opportunity for Tulsa to correct their wrongs from the past on offense and get on the right track in the Eastern Conference. Next up, we have a couple games kicking off at 8:05 Central on Saturday night. The first of which is going to be the Vegas Nighthawks at the Tucson Sugar Skulls. Vegas is probably going to be massive favorites. The highest line I've seen is -17, and that was last week, Frisco versus Jacksonville. This one, I would imagine, is going to be at least -17, if not more, maybe into the -20 seems like a lot, but man, Vegas is so good and Tucson is so not right now. It's going to be in the high teens, if not low 20s, in terms of this line. And in terms of over under, Vegas by themselves, as we've seen, is capable of putting up 60. Tucson has put up 50 plus in the past, but that was early on in the season, pre-injury to Malik Mitchell. So I would imagine this over-under is probably going to be around 96.5, 97.5, just because Tucson's offense over the past month or so has not been great and leaves much to be desired. So depending on what this line is, this could be a prime opportunity to jump on it, given that Malik Mitchell had a get back week last week. Didn't go so well, but maybe this week he could be a little bit more comfortable and some of the weapons on that Tucson offense can gel a little bit more. So this will be an interesting one to see what the lines are, but it probably going to be a blowout for in Vegas's favor. Last game of the night is going to be the reigning champions, the Bay Area Panthers at the Arizona Rattlers. Now, this has the potential to be another low-scoring, ugly in a good way game for the Bay Area Panthers. And as we know, they've been the kings of those ugly wins so far this season. There are multiple storylines at play here. First of which is Dalton Snead, quarterback for the Arizona Rattlers, who was hurt last week and didn't play. He was the quarterback for Bay Area last year when they won the championship. This would be a great story if he's able to play against his former team and if they're able to pull off the win against the reigning champs. So hopefully Dalton Snead can play. If he doesn't, I would pounce on this Bay Area spread no matter what it is. But this should be a pretty good matchup if everyone is healthy. Shane Simpson for the Bay Area Panthers has been on an unbelievable run the past couple of weeks. Shannon Brooks, the same thing for Arizona. Both running attacks are very, very good. So this will be a fun one. I think it's going to be a low scoring, just like we saw last week with both of these teams in their own respective games, probably like a 48, 42, 48, 45, somewhere in that range. So maybe that's not too low scoring. But it just depends on what the line is. I could see this line being anywhere from 85.5 to 95.5, just strictly depending on the health of Dalton Snead and Daquan Neal for Bay Area. So this one's the biggest toss-up depending on injury. Then the last game of the slate takes place on Sunday at 5:05 Central, so 6:05 Eastern. It's going to be Duke City at San Diego. Both of these teams played each other in their first game of the season. Super low-scoring game in Duke City. I think the final score was like 29-23 or 26-23, somewhere in that range. Duke City looked a lot better last week with the introduction of Joe Mancuso. San Diego has looked great all year on offense for the most part. This has the opportunity to be an upset spot for Duke City just because of how well they looked when they weren't even at full strength last week. And San Diego has one more week of the suspensions on wide receivers Arthur Jackson and Hoodie Rogers. So Duke City has a pretty good defense. This San Diego line's probably going to be close to 8.5, 9.5, somewhere in that range, with the over-under being probably mid-90s, 95.5, 96.5, somewhere in that range. But depending on what this line looks like, it might be an interesting spot to take Duke City. I love San Diego, but just based on the momentum that Duke City has been building over this past week and since they signed Joe Mancuso, it could be an overreaction on my part. That's very possible, but this one's going to be interesting. If it's a double digit line in favor of San Diego, I might lean towards taking the Duke City points. So that's IFL Week 10 preview. Going to be some very good games on the slate this upcoming weekend. Going to be some games that aren't as good on paper, but they're all going to be entertaining in their own way for the good, the bad, or the ugly. So definitely check those out. And I think the games that I'm most excited about are Frisco, Green Bay, probably Duke City, San Diego, and Bay Area, Arizona, depending on the health of Dalton Snead in that Arizona game. So those three games are very exciting to watch and highly recommend checking out. Up next, we've got an interview with kicker Alberto Castaneda. He's currently a free agent, but has been in the indoor and arena game for a couple of years now, playing for a couple different teams, which we'll dive into in a bit. But I came across Alberto. I was watching the West Texas Washington AFL game that was being streamed live online from Washington. And they panned to the crowd and they showed him in the crowd with a sign that said free agent kicker, 3 years pro, listed his accolades, listed what teams he's played for, the Aztec Bowl, all these different things on his sign. So I tweeted it out and I was like, this guy rules. This is how you do some marketing. Shared it with a couple of other arena content creators. And scrolling Instagram a few hours later, I came across Alberto's profile that had the video of him holding up the sign at the game. So I thought it was a super interesting viral marketing opportunity that he capitalized on. And so I wanted to chat through that with him, chat through his football journey, chat through what's next for him and what he's got on the horizon. So without further ado, here's Alberto. All right, joining us on the show today, we've got kicker Alberto Castaneda. Alberto, thanks for joining the show. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I came across Alberto. I was watching the AFL game this past weekend in Washington, and I saw Alberto in the crowd. He had a sign that said "Free Agent Kicker, 3 years
Hmm.
pro." It was just a casual crowd shot, and I was like, "All right, that's pretty cool. The guy's getting after it. He's chasing his dream." Log on to Instagram a few hours after the game. I come across his profile with that same post. So I was like, you know what? It's meant to be. I got to reach out, got to say what's up to Alberto. So what inspired you to make the sign and go out to the game? Like, was it just an epiphany or what
Oh,
happened
no,
with
no,
it?
no. The sign actually has a story of origin to it. I want
Okay.
to give a big shout out to my boy James Harden. He's also a professional athlete, a person that has been grinding and showing nothing but motivation to
Mhm.
athletes like myself on Instagram and other social media platforms. He's actually the person who inspired me to get the sign out and go out of my way because he goes to Cowboys practice camps, UFL games, USFL, XFL games. He's also holding the sign. He's had some luck in the arena leagues also. He played in the
Nice.
FCF. He's also a person with a great resume in this football journey that we all are striving to get to. And
Hmm.
he's honestly the person who inspired me to put the sign up. So shout out to James Harden.
Nice. So do you live in the Washington area or did you make the trek specifically for the game?
No, no, I live here in the Washington area. I live in Everett, maybe 10 minutes
Okay.
away from the actual arena itself.
Okay. So you lucked out.
Yeah,
Lucked
yeah,
out having a team that close. Cool.
yeah. I did.
Um, yeah, so let's talk through your football journey. I believe in one of the videos you posted on your Instagram, which you can plug here before you answer.
Sure.
I think you mentioned you played soccer before kicking in
Uh,
football. Is that correct?
I played a little bit of soccer growing up. It was never
Okay.
really my main sport. I didn't really dabble into sports until I got into high school. I played football. I was a diver and I was a pole vaulter in track and field. So
Okay.
I honestly picked up football because I did not want to learn the play calls. I did not want to learn the hand signals. I did not want to be the wide receiver staring at the quarterback and trying to figure out what this or
Right.
that or any of that other stuff means. So I just had one objective: make the ball, kick it, make it go in.
Yeah, you go out there, you score
Yeah,
points, you leave.
exactly.
That's one way to go about it. So tell us about your Instagram page that you have. You post a lot of tutorials on kicking. Some of the stuff looks
Yes,
really cool. How'd you get started
appreciate that.
with that?
So the Instagram stuff, it pretty much just started off as a music thing. I used to be an artist before becoming a football player. So I was
Okay.
pretty much locked in, fully loaded with football right out of high school. I had some offers, I had some invitations and scholarship offers also to some schools, but I really didn't pursue football anymore towards high school, and I just dedicated myself to music. and that's where the name came up. I got a good following, and ever since the pandemic started, I told myself, well, there's a football field across the street. There's nothing to do. Let's get back into this, and just took advantage of my name and my following and my social media platform to
Yeah.
pretty much boost myself and promote myself within the football world.
That's awesome. So how long was that break in between high school and getting back into it?
I want to say 5 years, 4 or 5 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, 4 or 5 years. And I started kicking just with shoes on, and eventually got some cleats. Eventually got an extra ball. That ball turned into two. That ball turned into four. Now I have like 25 different balls, which is NFL, CFL, Mexico League, European League, Arena
Okay.
Leagues. I have almost every single ball by brand just so I can be ready, because you never know what you're gonna get when it comes to these
Yeah.
leagues.
Yeah. You don't have to get ready if you stay ready, right? Yeah. That's good. You have all the
Exactly.
different sizes and you're ready to roll.
Exactly.
Um, yeah. So in that 4 to 5 year gap, you eventually joined some like smaller arena leagues, then eventually made your way over to the CIF, right? Like what did that journey look like getting into the professional indoor and arena game?
I think it was a little too fast, to be honest with you. I think
Okay.
my come up was a little too fast. Not saying that I have a come up or anything like that. Not trying to toot
Hmm.
my own horn, but it was definitely fast because I during the pandemic happened. I'm kicking again. I still have the hang of it. I still can do my thing, and I hear about a local semi-pro team starting up, and I go and try out. Eventually, make the team. Uh, Kicks, couple kicks, punts, kickoffs here. Then I get offered that position to go play for that small organization that gave me the position to start and dip my feet into the water, which is arena football.
Hmm.
And then from there, I had the opportunity to represent Team USA down in Mexico, playing the Aztec Bowl, historic event that's been happening in Mexico since like the 20s,
Hmm.
USA versus Mexico, and that's pretty much where everything just came forward after that. Southwest Kansas called, Salina called. Uh, I hit up some camps with the Vegas Nighthawks, San Diego Strike Force, and then eventually it was just boom, 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 boom to where I'm at now with this whole season, which is like I feel like I'm at a big pause because of what's going on, the
Right.
instability or the just overall fundamentals of the football world, how it's going on right now.
Yeah, it's got to be tough from a player's perspective, especially someone who's just looking for the opportunity. Like you're
Yeah,
literally watching the opportunities fold day by day. Like one just happened within the past 24 hours. So it's got to be tough.
yeah,
But you like you said earlier, you just got to stay ready with it, right?
yeah, absolutely. I had to stay ready, and that's how I started my journey. Just being ready, putting that extra effort into it, and thanks to the Wenatchee Skyhawks, they called me up. They gave me the opportunity to dip my feet into the water, and everything just went on from there.
Nice. So you say you started in the outdoor game kicking, then transitioned to the indoor game, right?
Yes, sir.
So besides the obvious of the goalpost being a little bit less wide in the
Hmm.
indoor game, what was one of the bigger transitions from the outdoor game to the indoor game from a kicking perspective?
To be honest, the only difference was just getting used to the turf. That's it. Used to
Okay.
the turf. Yeah, a lot of kickers don't like kicking the arena balls because they're composite balls. They can go wherever they want in their terms, I
Hmm.
guess. But to me, a kick in an arena football has always been way easier than a kick in a leather ball. Is pretty much just getting used to the actual turf itself, the turf carpet
Yeah.
sometimes. But
Yeah.
that's honestly the biggest transition that I had going into arena football. Honestly, is just getting used to the playing surface.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. And as you were playing arena league or arena football from league to league, what so you mentioned the carpet, some of its actual turf. Like was there ever a moment where you stepped onto the field and immediately you took one step and you were like, "Oh boy, this is going to be a rough one." Or is it that
Absolutely,
that noticeable?
absolutely. I
Yeah.
so before I played for the first team I played for, I got to do an exhibition match with them in a in a different team. Also, the venue was
Mhm.
great. It's just yeah, absolutely. When I stepped onto that field, I was like, wow, oh well, let's do it.
So your experience with the Southwest Kansas Storm and the Billings Outlaws, who are now in the AFL, but when you were with them, they were in the CIF. But tell me a little bit
Hmm.
more about that. What was that like?
Dodge City is a very interesting city that will always have a place in my heart.
Uh
I
huh.
never imagined myself playing in the CIF, none less being in the state of Kansas.
Right.
And the Southwest Kansas Storm organization really is just something that's amazing because they're bringing football to the smallest communities possible, and it's something that we can all interact, have fun, drink a beer, and just let loose and forget
Yeah.
about your problems. Just go to a game, that's unfortunately the most that's going on down there. But hey, Dodge City is an amazing town. Shout out to
Yeah,
Coach Henderson. Shout out to the coaching staff that was out there when I had the pleasure of playing out there. And Southwest Kansas Storm, great experience. I loved it out there.
that's awesome. Yeah, that's something with the new AFL, that's something I noticed where we had these massive markets like Orlando, Nashville, but then you had the smaller markets like Salina and like Dodge City for Southwest Kansas. So it's an interesting dynamic at play where, like you said, in Dodge City, that's
Hmm.
the only gig in town. But
Yeah,
Orlando, there's quite a few other things to do. Nashville, it's quite a few other things to do. So it can be a little bit more saturated, and you can have a harder time drawing people in those bigger markets, which is
yeah,
kind of counterintuitive if you think about it, but it kind of makes
yeah.
sense at the same time.
Absolutely. No, I enjoyed it out there. The place where we were staying out, shout out the Dodge House, this historic hotel that we got to stay in. A lot of people can have their own opinions about it, but as a historian, I really enjoyed it. There's a lot of cool stuff on the walls, things to read about, mostly old Western stuff from back in the day, the Wild West. But it was a really cool experience overall.
Awesome. And what about Billings? How was your experience with the Outlaws?
If I could move to Billings right now, I would. I love
Okay.
Billings so much. Billings is one of the most amazing towns that I've ever played in. The arena is by far the best establishment that I've ever stepped foot in. Shout out Steve Titus, the owner of the Billings Outlaws.
Hmm.
That man has showed me nothing but love and respect, and that is the one person that I can truly take my hat off and take a bullet for. He was there for me when I went out to Billings. He was there for me when I left Billings, and he's been there for me still to this day, just trying to help me out to get my name out there more and words of encouragement. And that's a person that I can honestly say hats off to. As you can see, I'm representing Billings. I love that team,
Yeah.
and I would love to go back there. Their kicker's really good. I do
Yeah.
not want to take his spot. I do not
Uh,
want to say that there's anything going towards that. If anything,
yep.
he's listening, Bailey, I hope you get signed to a bigger league so I can take your spot in that point of,
Yeah.
not other than that. Yeah, shout out to the Billings
Yeah.
organization
Yeah.
big time.
Yeah.
Metro Park, shout out Yellowstone Fitness, all that stuff out there.
Yeah. It's all love. One community night. We're not trying to take food off of other people's plates by
No,
any
no,
means.
no, 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 no. Yeah.
So you mentioned something about the Aztec Bowl. I want to hit on that. That's one of
Mhm.
the things I've seen the name, but I've never fully understood what it was. So how did you get involved in that, and what was your experience like there?
Oh my God. The Aztec Bowl is something that I've been following since I was a kid. As a kid, I used to look up Mexican football players in the NFL, Mexican professional football players. And then I'd look
Yeah.
up football players with the last name Castaneda, like myself. And let's just say there was a brief moment where I almost got to play for the Green Bay Blizzards, and I probably would have been the second Castaneda to play for them in history back in
Okay.
2006. Eduardo Castaneda, linebacker, played for them.
All right.
But that's a little off topic. I want to say I want to honestly thank Coach Mark Lozano. He was the recruiting person for the Team USA down there to get us down there. Shout out Coach Mummy, Hal Mummy, an amazing head coach. They are the people who pretty much put this thing together. For a while, it didn't happen because of COVID. It's just an international friendly rivalry, USA versus Mexico. That's all it is,
Hmm.
and it has a historic background from almost I literally the 20s. I want to say because
Wow.
the oldest game that I saw, it was 1926 or something like that, but it probably goes further than that. It's a game that I am proud to not only be a part of, but to also like have the privilege to say I got to play in the Aztec Bowl. I got to play in the Aztec Bowl because
Yeah.
the game of football means one thing, but getting the privilege and chance to play in the home country where your family is from and where your culture is from and all these other things is
Right.
more than anything to me. I got to do what I love back in Mexico in front of my people, in front of my family, in front of
Right.
my what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
that to me means more than anything. And it was a beautiful experience that I can never be duplicated.
That's great. Is that game always played in Mexico?
For the most part, it's mostly played in Mexico. Every
Okay.
other year, they would switch it from the United States to Mexico. Not sure what's going on this year.
Hmm.
Last year, I think they still played it in Mexico, and this year they might bring it up here. But it's a 1 day thing. It's one of those things that it's a week trip. We go out there as a team, we bond, and we just get things done. We go out and have some fun. We play some ball.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like we touched on a little bit before, that community, right? Where it's just a
Exactly.
bunch of guys getting together and playing ball, and whether honestly, it doesn't even matter at that point what side of the field you're on. You're all there for one
Yeah.
common purpose, right? And
Yeah.
and that's something that as I've gotten further into indoor and arena football, I've realized there are so many leagues, not just in the US, but internationally.
Mm-hmm.
Like you touched on some of them,
Mm-hmm.
like the league in Mexico. There's a European league. There's the
Mm-hmm.
Canadian Football League. There's leagues in
Mm-hmm.
every corner of the world, it seems like. So
Mm-hmm.
to see games like the Aztec Bowl and to see stuff like that happening, it's just great to see the game grow as a whole. And more football is never a bad thing. At least I don't think so.
Like you said it yourself, there's so many opportunities to play this sport that I feel like once I understood, okay, this is what football is, this is where it could take you, this is what you can do, is when I
Right.
slowly started to stop chasing the NFL. Not saying I
Hmm.
don't want to get there, especially
Yeah.
with the new rules, with the new kicking rules. This is probably my ear.
Hmm.
Let's be honest, because
Let's go.
arena football has taught me to play it inside the ball, play it inside the field, play it inside the field. Because if it goes
Yep.
out of bounds, that's bad, and that's the new rules in the NFL. But
Hmm.
uh, I talked about Coach Mark Lozano, Hal Mummy, Coach Leo Aragoose, ex punter for the Seahawks, Ravens. That guy has been my right hand for any little thing that I need. Is when it comes to advice, kicking advice, life advice, just anything in general. Shout out to him.
Yeah.
And being in Mexico with those guys was just one of the craziest experiences. I learned a lot. I got to experience a lot, and thankfully to this day I still get to keep them in touch. How you said, it's a brotherhood. It's something that brings us together, unites us. We're all in it for the same reason.
Right. Yeah, and especially that community amongst kickers, like that's got to be a tight knit
Mm-hmm.
group. It's like a
Mm-hmm.
community within the community.
Yeah, exactly. Like some of us hate each other, some of us love each other, some of us love and hate each other. It's one of those things.
Yeah.
We all want one thing, and unfortunately, with us, it has to be a love hate relationship, because if there's only 8 teams in the league, that means there's only 8 jobs.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
it's
it.
not like wide receivers where there's four or five of them on a team. It's like, no, there's one spot and all your friends are going for the one spot.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah, that's tough. Well, what's next for you? Do you have anything on the horizon? Is there anything that's looking promising? What's next for Alberto Castaneda?
Oof. I wish I could say that I have something coming up, but this world of football has taught me that you never know what's next, really.
Right.
And that's the
Yeah.
most professional answer that I can give you, because I've had some talks with some teams. I've been in contact with some coaches, but nothing unfortunately can be said for sure. This is what's going on. So just keeping my eyes open, staying
Yeah.
ready, working out, taking advice from anyone and everyone that can help me motivate myself and push me forward to this journey, and just being ready and staying open for the next opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to hear that, and love to see what you're doing on your social pages, like I mentioned earlier. Go ahead and plug that for us. Where can people follow along with you?
You guys can check me out on Instagram at Freako Bandito, FREAKO BANDEEDO. That's my Instagram page. I post a lot of kicking stuff,
Hmm.
just pretty much whatever I think is cool. I'll post it. You'll see my story go from football to Mexican music to wrestling to a hamster in a wheel. So you get a little
What's
bit of
not the
everything.
love? Yeah, you got a little bit of
Exactly,
everything. What's not the love?
exactly, exactly.
Right. Well, Alberto, thank you so much for joining the show today. Best of luck with everything you got going forward, and I'll definitely be in touch with you. And hopefully, we'll see you on AFL, IFL, some field soon.
Oh, we'll be out there once again. Again,
Let's go.
this season has been a little slow, but that doesn't mean it's the last season. So with
Of
that being
course.
said, I want to leave you guys with my favorite quote of the life. Shout out to my high school, Everett High School here in Everett, Washington. Make it a great day, y'all. The choice is yours.
Let's go. Love that. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Lastly, we've got AFL Week 3, and there's a lot going on with the AFL right now. A lot more bad than good, unfortunately. I have a full list of notes here to make sure I am able to stay on track with everything that's happened in just the past week since the last episode of Off the Wall drop. So it's only been 7 days since the last episode. All these things have happened within the past 7 days. So last time we spoke, we talked about the Iowa Rampage folding, then playing a game, and then folding for real. Over the past week, Philadelphia Soul ceased operations for 2024 and will be focusing on 2025 using air quotes here. I'll believe it when I see it. The Georgia Force officially folded with no mention of 2025 being in the books. Both of those were, the writing was on the wall. You knew it was going to happen. It was only a matter of when. Both of those were also league owned and league operated. So you'll notice a pattern with some of the league owned and operated teams here as we go through. And then Orlando and Louisiana, those teams are still around, but that game was set for Thursday night and it was canceled by the league. No real indication or clear reason why it was canceled. You would think it's because of the field and dasher board situation and the net situation and the general roughness, for lack of a better term, of the arena situation in Louisiana, just because they were so rushed a week before the season to move over to a brand new city and a brand new arena. They just weren't well equipped for it. So that wasn't made clear. So right off the bat, we've got two teams folded, and then two teams had a game that was canceled. Straight up. The Minnesota Myth were supposed to play the Albany Firebirds this past weekend at the Target Center in Minnesota. This was going to be a pretty premier matchup because Albany is undefeated. They've shown that they're one of the best teams in the AFL. Minnesota had a bounce back game after getting whopped by Nashville in week one. They had a bounce back game against the Philadelphia Soul, so take that with a grain of salt. So it was going to be a true litmus test of Minnesota's on-field ability to see, all right, put them up against Albany. Let's see what they're about. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective and how the rest of these things shake out, the Minnesota Timberwolves of the NBA are going on a playoff run right now. So they needed the Target Center the day before and the day after the Minnesota Myth game was set to be played. So the solution was no problem. We'll have the game flipped over to Albany. So instead of playing the game in Minnesota, we'll just play the game in Albany and then push it back 2 days because Albany has their own stuff going on at the arena. Everyone's happy. Cool. That works. Only thing is, the game ends up getting canceled because, and I quote, Minnesota could not make it, from a press release from the Albany Firebirds. Speculation from sources are saying it stems from money issues, which makes sense being that the wife of the commissioner is the air quote owner of the Minnesota Myth, and all the other league-owned teams, like the ones we talked about earlier, had either been shut down or ceased operations up to this point. So it makes sense that Minnesota was on the path to do that because they, quote, couldn't make it to the game in Albany. And then on Monday, it was announced that the Minnesota Myth would be folding. So the writing was on the wall there. It was bound to happen, and it did happen. So that makes 4 of the original 16 teams that this league started with 3 weeks ago have folded. 25% of the league is gone like that. So not off to a good start. And the week was still young there. So with the Georgia Force folding, that left Nashville without an opponent. Now, I will tell you, this is where it gets very confusing and very dicey. And I'm probably going to lose some of you if you're trying to keep track of this. So follow us on Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff, Off the Wall FB. If you have any questions, please send them to me. I'll be happy to clarify anything I got. But this is going to get a little confusing, so just buckle up. Salina was originally slated to play Oregon, to take on the Black Bears in Oregon. But Oregon's venue was deemed not safe enough by the league, and Salina was like, nah, we're not going to play there. We're not doing that. So Salina was rescheduled to face Nashville, who had an opening because Georgia folded. So we go from Nashville versus Georgia and Salina versus Oregon to Salina versus Nashville. Nice compromise for all parties involved, except for Oregon. So flip over to the West Coast. West Texas was supposed to play Washington in Washington. However, West Texas was in a lawsuit with their former league for violation of contract when they joined the AFL and left the NAL the way that they did. The NAL contract stated they had to stay in the league for at least 3 years. They did not stay in the league for at least 3 years. They stayed in it for a grand total of 1 year, then bounced to the AFL. So from the NAL's perspective, I get why they did the lawsuit the way that they did. They needed to set a precedent that, hey, going forward, NAL teams cannot just leave whenever they want. I get why they did it. But it was looking dicey that West Texas would not be able to compete in the game versus Washington because the judge who was overseeing the case placed a block on West Texas from participating in any AFL game in the future until this was resolved. So that put West Texas in a little bit of a spot where legally they could not play in the AFL until this was resolved. So what does Washington do? They call up their boys over in Oregon and say, hey, Oregon, I saw you just got bailed on by Salina. Why don't you guys come up to play us in Washington? Oregon was like, bet. Okay, let's do it. So Oregon was scheduled and announced that they were going up to Washington to play the Wolfpack for the second time in 3 weeks. So nothing wrong with that. Keep it regional, keep it local. So they announce that Oregon's going to Washington. And then the very next day, West Texas announces that they've settled their suit out of court, paid off the NAL basically, and now They are, in fact, the ones that are going to be playing Washington, not Oregon. So there was a span of about 12 to 14 hours where Oregon was saying they're playing Washington. West Texas was saying they're playing Washington. Washington isn't really saying anything, and then the AFL is silent. And that's something key to take note of amongst all this. The AFL is silent on everything that we're telling you about. Every single thing. Commissioner hasn't come out and said anything. Several members of the executive leadership have resigned over the past week. Forgot to put that in the notes, but yeah, that's a thing. CEO resigned. Um, Another person, I forget the title, they also resigned. So basically, the commissioner and the deputy commissioner are the only two left in the original leadership group of the AFL. And they're silent. They're not saying anything. They have not said a word since before week one and the whole Philadelphia Soul conundrum happened with the replacement players in Louisiana. They have not said a word. So West Texas settled their lawsuit and they end up playing Washington in Washington. So Oregon just gets a bye week. They play nobody. That's the way it happens. Shouldn't have had cattle fencing in a rodeo venue. Sorry, Oregon. Flip over to Billings. Billings Outlaws were scheduled to face the Rapid City Marshals in South Dakota. Billings arrived. They were all suited up. They were warming up on the field, and then 30 minutes before kickoff, it was announced that the game was being forfeited by Rapid City due to, quote, ongoing issues and unfulfilled promises by the AFL. So, for tracking purposes, over the past week or so, since the last episode of Off the Wall, we've had 3 teams fold / ceased operations, air quote. 4 games were rescheduled or canceled. 1 game was relocated and then canceled. One team forfeited due to unfulfilled pay promises from the AFL. It's a lot. It's a lot of moving parts in the AFL, and it's a mess. But the good news is that there was football played in the AFL this past weekend. So despite all that nonsense, all that stuff, there were 3 games that were played. That's the good news. The bad news is that only one of them was streamed. 1. So heading into this week, we were supposed to have 16 teams, 8 games, multiple games on the NFL Network, multiple games streamed. It went from that a couple weeks ago to 3 games being played, with one of them being streamed and the other 2 available via your local radio broadcast of the city where it was being played. The year is 2024. We have 14 and 15-year-olds streaming themselves playing video games in 4K from the comfort of their homes. Yet, the Arena Football League is not able to figure out how to stream games online. Like, how is this possible? Go to Best Buy with a credit card, ask the Geek Squad there, hey, what do I need to stream X, Y, and Z? Tell them to charge it to the game, load it up, get it set up at the arena, and go. You have positioned yourself as the, quote, premier indoor and arena football league of the United States. Yet you can't figure out streaming. I just don't understand. Like, it's insane to me that a top 20 TV market like Nashville does not have a streaming option in the venue where they're playing their games. I understand the Nashville Municipal Auditorium is an old building. I get that. It's 60, 70, 80 years old, somewhere in that range. I get that. That's fine. But it's 2024. There are options available. There are things that can be done. Teams in the league are choosing not to do it, and it's frustrating. Here's an example. AEW, All Elite Wrestling, is a professional wrestling company that tours the country constantly throughout the year. And they come through Nashville a couple times per year, and they broadcast a national cable TV show out of the same building that the Nashville Cats play at. But we can't get a YouTube stream set up for the AFL. We can't get a Vire stream set up for the AFL. We can't get any stream set up for the AFL. So one company is able to do a national cable TV show while another can't do a stream. It's just incompetence at an unbelievable level. But don't worry, you can listen to the radio broadcast on the website of the local sports radio affiliate in Nashville. So you got that going for you. It's just insane to me. I truly do not understand how it is such an issue. And I don't know. And again, the league is completely silent on all these things. The teams aren't giving answers on anything. Whenever people are asking, hey, is this being streamed? Why isn't this being streamed? There's just silence. There's just nothing. So there's just a lack of clarity, and it's making the IFL look like the greatest sports league in the world in comparison, because the AFL just is tripping over themselves and cannot get it together. And it's just extremely frustrating as a fan of arena and indoor football to see a legacy brand like the AFL and like some of these teams that are in the AFL just get damaged to an extent that not sure if it's entirely recoverable at this time. But like I said, there were 3 games played. Only one of them was televised. So only one of them I really have any sort of talking points on. The other two solely dependent on what I saw teams post on Twitter and some sideline footage I saw from people who were at the game. But first off, we've got West Texas beats Washington 35-21. So West Texas controlled the game the entire way. Bain looked much better at quarterback. And Lonnie Outlaw, he's a 6'7" wide receiver for West Texas. He's quietly having one of the better wide receiver seasons in the AFL this year for a couple reasons. A, West Texas has actually played all their games, so statistically, he should have one of the better seasons. And B, he's a 6'7" wide receiver, so you just throw it in the end zone and he'll go up and get it. So it's a shame we don't have any stats to officially lean on in the AFL. We've looked all over the place. There's no box scores or anything official. So Lonnie Outlaw passes the eye test. I know he scored multiple touchdowns throughout the season, but couldn't tell you exactly how much of each. Washington, they have flashes of quality. They haven't put together a full 60 minutes of football just yet. The live product is looking much better in person. It seems like they're slowly building something special in Washington, but the broadcast stream leaves much to be desired. Like, they didn't have a live scoreboard until the second half, and even then it was just a picture in picture of another camera pointing at this jumbotron in the arena itself. So I don't know the technical aspects of streaming and broadcasting like that, but I'm positive it cannot be as difficult as some of these teams are making it out to be. It just can't be. Second game, we've got the Salina Liberty beating the Nashville Cats 50-30. Again, not streamed, so not a lot of insight here, but it looks like Nashville started hot on offense, but Salina's defense stepped up and made play after play after play, and they eventually rolled the Cats in Nashville. Salina QB Charles McCullum had 5 total touchdowns on the day, 198 passing yards. So a solid outing from the IFL's all-time passing leader, who's now making his way in the AFL. So love to see a small market team like Salina come into a big market like Nashville and smack them around a little bit. That's what makes the arena game so interesting, is when you have situations like that where these smaller market teams can come in and punch these big market teams in the mouth and say, hey, we're better at football than you. That's cool to see. Then lastly, we've got the Wichita Regulators beating the Southwest Kansas Storm 44-42. So this is the first real major upset of the season so far. Southwest Kansas has some very high quality ball players on each side of the ball. They've got a couple guys who can probably take a next step to the next level of play just based on their performance through the first 3 games of the season so far. But they somehow came up short against this Regulators team that got absolutely rolled by Billings in week 1. Um, Again, not much to talk about here. I really wish there was, but there was no stream. So there's nothing to really base it off of. So 3 games were played. Only one of them was really streamed and could have been watched. So take it for what it is. But we have 12 teams remaining in the AFL at the time of this recording. Things could very well change. I would anticipate multiple schedule adjustments being made over the next couple of days and over the next week, not just for this week, but for the remainder of the season, with a couple of those teams folding. So I'm not going to bother to even look at the schedule for next week just because it's going to change. And by the time this comes out, it will probably be antiquated. So I'm not even gonna address it. So we'll talk about the games next week if they play and as they get played. Hopefully we'll have more streams than we did this week. It's hard to have less when we only had 1, but hey, you never know. Nothing's out of the question at this point. At the time of recording this, there are some rumblings that Jeff Fisher, the former Titans and Rams head coach in the NFL, will be unanimously selected as AFL Commissioner. No idea how this would logistically work, given how some of the rules have been hinted at of the league by owners. The Rapid City Marshals owner indicated in an interview earlier this week or last week that said that the owners can't vote the commissioner out just based on how it's the league is set up as a private company or something along those lines. I'm not sure exactly what he meant by that, but it's interesting to hear him say they can't vote him out, but then hear this report saying that Jeff Fisher has been unanimously selected by the remaining members of the AFL to be the next commissioner. So I don't know. Well, we'll have to see how this unfolds, but I wanted to mention it here as it's unfolding live, as I'm recording this, because if it does happen, that could right a lot of the wrongs that have been done by this previous commissioner and this previous leadership team. It's become more and more apparent each day, each week that goes by that they have no idea what they're doing, and they're damaging the brand reputation and the brand value that the AFL has built, destroyed, and rebuilt over the past 30, 40 years. So I don't know if Jeff Fisher is the best choice in the world for this role, but he is 1000% a step up from where we're at now. And hopefully this will be a common fact by the time this releases. And it'll be like, yeah, Trey, we know that. That's already a thing. I hope that's the case. And I honestly hope this will free us from the tyranny, we'll just call it, of the Lee Hutton era of the AFL, just because it's been such a disaster across the board in so many ways. And there's literally nowhere to go but up from here if we can get a new commissioner on board and a new leadership in place. And that's the show for this week. Thank you so much to Alberto Castaneda for dropping by and having a little chat with us. Hopefully, his viral marketing attempt will work out, and we'll be seeing him signing with the team here soon. But hope you guys enjoyed the show. IFL Week 9 recap was a blast. Week 10 is going to be great. AFL, it's the best, worst reality TV show on the internet right now. Twitter, X, and Instagram are just madhouses constantly over the past 3 weeks. It's like a car crash. It's gross, and I don't want to look, but I also can't look away. Just how everything's unfolding. So um, it's it's a whole bunch of chaos that's happening, and I do my best to kind of create a timeline of events on the Off the Wall social media pages. So if you want to give us a follow, again, Off the Wall FB, F as in foot, B as in ball, on Instagram, Twitter, X, and TikTok. Posting different types of content on all those, mixing it up on Twitter, getting in the mud a little bit in some conversations there, and posting some more visual content on Instagram and TikTok. So go follow us on there if you haven't already. YouTube, thumbs up, subscribe, all that stuff. Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I think it's a thumbs up or 5-star, whatever it is. Helps us out, helps us grow from here. So only 24 hours in a day. The fact that you chose to spend an hour and a half of that with me and with us at Off the Wall and our guy Alberto today means a lot. So hope you have a great rest of your week. Hopefully the AFL can get their act together. IFL will be fun as it always is, and we'll see you next time. Bye.